Before the Bible was written, before the words of Genesis were spoken, the world was ruled by beings so powerful, so ancient, that their very existence has been erased from the pages of history. These were the black gods, revered by civilizations far older than anything we know today. Their skin was as dark as the ancient African soil, and their wisdom reached beyond the stars, their teachings shaping the very foundation of spiritual knowledge. But here's the shocking truth. These gods were forgotten, erased, cast aside in the shadow of a new, singular divine image that would dominate the world for centuries. How could such powerful beings, who guided entire nations, simply vanish from the collective memory? Could it be that these black gods, whose stories and symbols still resonate in the lands of Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia, were intentionally removed from the history we've been taught? What if spiritual colonization wasn't just about land, but about erasing the divine truth that once connected us all? In this video, we're going to uncover the buried truths about these ancient African gods. You'll discover the untold story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, beings whose symbols and archetypes were transformed into the foundation of modern religion. We'll reveal how the very word Elohim in the Bible was distorted, once a plural term for a divine collective, now hidden behind the singular figure of God. Why was black spirituality hidden, repressed, and ultimately whitewashed? Why has the divine African connection been lost to history? Get ready, because the truth will shake the very core of what you think you know about faith, history, and the gods that once walked this earth. And as we journey deeper, ask yourself, could everything you've been told about God and religion be a lie? As we dive into these ancient secrets, don't just watch, participate. Share your thoughts, your revelations in the comments, and subscribe for more truths that have been kept hidden for millennia. Like this video to help others awaken to the forgotten truths of our shared spiritual origin. Before the Bible was ever written, before Moses stood on the mountain and received the laws that would shape the world, the ancient lands of Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia were filled with the wisdom of gods whose very existence shaped the course of humanity. These gods, Osiris, Isis, and Horus, were not just symbols of power. They were living embodiments of divine truth, revered by the people as the very essence of life itself. Their skin, as dark as the sacred lands they protected, was a reflection of their deep connection to the earth, to the divine forces that guided the stars and the waters. But over the centuries, something happened. Their stories were erased, their symbols rewritten. And in their place, a new, singular image of divinity emerged, whitewashed, distorted, and stripped of the original truths these ancient civilizations had known. The black gods of ancient Africa were erased, and in their place, a new narrative took shape, one that would dominate the world for millennia. Why was this so? What was the purpose of silencing the divine faces of these ancient African gods, whose wisdom and spiritual teachings formed the bedrock of civilization itself? Was it a deliberate attempt to control the spiritual narrative and, by extension, the faith of millions? Could it be that black spirituality, so deeply rooted in the divine connection between humanity and the earth, was seen as a threat by those who sought to build an empire founded on a singular, powerful image of divinity? These are the questions we must ask ourselves as we dig deeper into the history of the black gods who were erased by time. The very word Elohim, a term that has come to define God in the Bible, was originally a plural term. Elohim referred to a collective of divine beings, a community of spiritual forces, working in harmony to create and sustain the world. But over time, this concept was distorted, transformed from a plural divine reality into a singular, masculine God. Why was this done? And what did it mean for the faith of future generations? The story of Elohim is a profound example of the spiritual colonization that took place over centuries. The plural nature of Elohim was swept under the rug, replaced by the concept of a singular, isolated God. In ancient African spiritual traditions, the divine was always seen as a community of spirits, interconnected with the natural world. The gods were not distant, unattainable beings. They were seen as living forces, present in everything, from the sky above to the soil beneath. This was the foundation of African spiritual thought, the belief that the divine was always present, always alive, always in relationship with humanity. Yet, the vision of Elohim that emerged from later Judeo-Christian traditions turned this vibrant, pluralistic view of the divine into a monolithic, impersonal force. This transformation, while part of the development of these religious traditions, also served to erase the original, rich conceptions of the divine that were rooted in African spirituality. This is why, in the Bible, Elohim is often translated simply as God, a singular entity, thus severing the deep connection between the divine and the many faces of creation. Consider the story of Osiris, the god of resurrection and the afterlife. Osiris was not just a god of death, he was the very embodiment of life's eternal cycle. He was murdered, dismembered, and yet through the mystical power of Isis, his wife, he was reborn. Osiris' resurrection was not simply about an individual, but about the continuity of the soul, the cycle of life and death, and the eternal nature of the spirit. This story, which predates the story of Christ by thousands of years, was later adapted into the Christian narrative of the resurrection of Jesus. But here's the crucial difference. In the African tradition, Osiris was not white. His skin was dark, and his power was connected to the very land that birthed him. This is not just a minor detail. It's a key to understanding how African spirituality was reframed over time, how the powerful legacy of these black gods was subdued and replaced with something that did not reflect the original divine connection to the earth. The transformation of Osiris into Christ, the transformation of Isis into the Virgin Mary, and the transformation of Horus into the infant Jesus were part of a much larger effort to rewrite history, to shape the narrative of divinity in ways that would serve new political powers. The gods who had been revered in Africa as part of the sacred relationship between humanity and nature were gradually whitewashed and removed from their rightful place in the divine order. In ancient Egypt, the land of Kemet, everything was connected to the divine. The pharaohs were not just kings, they were seen as the living embodiment of divinity on earth, holding the power to maintain cosmic order. The Nile River, the stars, the plants, and the animals, all were sacred, all were part of the divine circle of life. Blackness, in this context, was not just a physical characteristic. It was a sacred mark, a reflection of the divine's presence in the world. The land of Kemet, the Black Land, was a place where the gods and humans were intricately connected, where spirituality and nature were one. But in the centuries that followed, as Christianity spread and Islam took root, these ancient African concepts of the divine were erased, distorted, and replaced with new gods and new systems that did not reflect the ancient truths. The black gods who once ruled the world were relegated to the sidelines of history, their teachings ignored, their power diluted, their very existence reduced to myth. But the truth is that these black gods were never truly erased. Their essence still lives in the stories we tell, in the symbols we hold dear, in the rituals we practice, and in the very soul of humanity. The Elohim of the Bible, the Trinity, the resurrection, and the heavens, all these concepts can trace their roots back to the ancient African gods. And though their faces may have been whitewashed, their spirit cannot be denied. As we look back at these ancient truths, it becomes clear that black spirituality is not something that was lost or forgotten. It was suppressed, hidden from view by those who sought to maintain control over the divine narrative. But now, as we begin to awaken to the truths that were buried, we are reclaiming the knowledge of the black gods, the gods of Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia, and restoring them to their rightful place in our spiritual consciousness. The history of these gods is not just about the past, it is about our future. The power of these ancient deities is not just a relic of an old world, it is a living force that can transform our present reality. We are called to reconnect with the divine wisdom that these gods embody, to remember the sacred relationship between humanity and the earth, and to reclaim the true image of the divine that was once ours. This is the journey we are on now. And as we move forward, let us remember the truth that was always there. The black gods never left us. They are with us now, guiding us, awakening us to the spiritual power that has always resided within us. And as we continue this journey, let us ask ourselves, what would happen if we finally embraced the truth of these ancient gods and allowed them to lead us into a new spiritual era, one rooted in the truth of who we are and where we come from? This is not just a story, it is a revelation, and it is one that has the power to transform everything we thought we knew about spirituality, divinity, and the very nature of existence itself. The black gods of ancient Africa are calling us back, and the time has come to listen. As we step deeper into the history of the divine, let's explore the story of Elohim, a word that has echoed through the ages and been woven into the very fabric of our spiritual consciousness. The word Elohim is often translated simply as God in the Bible, but its true meaning carries a depth that has been largely ignored. Elohim is plural, yes, plural. It refers not to a single God, but to a divine assembly, a collective of spiritual beings working together in harmony to create the world and sustain the balance of life. The divine was never meant to be a solitary entity, but a community of power, interconnected and ever-present. In ancient African traditions, the gods were seen as living forces, ever-present in the natural world. The divine was not distant or isolated, but actively involved in the lives of its people. The idea of Elohim reflects this deeper, more holistic understanding of divinity, one that is not bound by singularity but celebrates the richness of a spiritual collective where each member plays an integral part in the creation and the cosmic order. But over the centuries, as religious doctrines took root and grew into empires, the plurality of the divine was lost. The concept of Elohim was distorted. It became reduced to a singular male figure, completely disconnected from the divine multiplicity that once characterized African spirituality. This shift was not accidental. It was part of a broader effort to control and centralize divine power, to place it in the hands of a select few, and to sever the connection between humanity and nature that had once been central to spiritual life. This process of erasure didn't happen overnight. It was a deliberate rewriting of spiritual history, a restructuring of how people would come to understand the divine. When we speak of God today, we often picture a singular, distant figure, removed from the natural world. But in the ancient world, particularly in Africa, the gods were not separate from the earth, but were interwoven with it. The earth was sacred, the air was sacred, the stars were sacred, and the gods walked among their people. This is the divine interconnectedness that Elohim represents. Look at the story of Osiris, whose resurrection story has deeply influenced many religious traditions. Osiris was not simply a god who came back to life. His resurrection symbolized the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, a cycle that is still alive in nature today. The ancient Egyptians understood that death was not an end, but a transformation into something greater. This belief is echoed in the concept of Elohim, where the divine is in constant flow and evolution. This idea was deeply rooted in the understanding that the spiritual world and the physical world were one and the same. There was no divide between the sacred and the profane. Osiris's story is a reflection of how these ancient gods were deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. Osiris's death and his subsequent resurrection mirrored the cycles of the Nile River, which flooded and receded, bringing life and nourishment to the land. In the same way, the gods were inseparable from nature, and the divine was reflected in every aspect of existence. But this connection has been lost to history. The gods of Egypt, once revered and respected, were marginalized, their teachings diluted and hidden from public view. Isis, the mother goddess and sister to Osiris, was also a figure who held power over life and death. She represented the divine feminine, the nurturing and life-giving force that connects us to our roots, to our ancestors, and to the divine wisdom of the earth. But as we look at the transformation of these gods through time, we see how their stories were reinterpreted. Isis, the great mother goddess, was transformed into the figure of the Virgin Mary in Christianity. The powerful, dark-skinned woman who was revered as the mother of life became a symbol of purity, but with the darkness of her origins erased. This wasn't just about changing images, it was about reclaiming power. By whitewashing these powerful figures, the powers that be could control the narrative of the divine, separating it from its African roots and distorting it into something that served the colonial and religious powers of the time. What was once a celebration of black divinity became a tool for spiritual control, shaping the way generations of people would come to understand God, faith, and their relationship with the world. But the truth cannot stay buried forever. The legacy of black gods, the gods who once ruled Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia, still lives in the bones of the earth. The symbols, the teachings, the spiritual practices of these ancient peoples have not disappeared, they have simply been repressed. And now, as we look to the past, we see that the divine connection that was once central to African spirituality is beginning to awaken once again. The story of Elohim, and the transformation of the ancient gods into figures that we recognize today, is a story of power, spirituality, and the erasure of a truth that was once known by millions. But as we reclaim these ancient truths, we begin to understand the true meaning of divinity. The divine is not a singular, isolated entity. It is a living force, present in all things. The gods are not just figures of the past, but living energies that still shape our lives today. Now more than ever, we are called to reconnect with the divine wisdom that was once hidden from us. The black gods of Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia are waiting to be remembered. Their teachings are not just ancient relics. They are a living, breathing force that can help us reconnect with our true spiritual essence. As we continue to explore these truths, we must ask ourselves, what happens when we finally embrace the power and wisdom of these ancient gods? What would it mean for us to reclaim the divine connection that was once ours and is still within us? The time has come for the black gods to return to their rightful place in the divine narrative. The time has come for us to awaken to the truth that has been hidden for far too long. And as we move forward, let us remember that Elohim was never meant to be one. It was always a community, a collective of spiritual beings living in harmony with the natural world. Divinity is not something that is distant from us. It is a presence that is within us, guiding us, leading us back to the truth of who we really are. This is not just a story. This is a reawakening, a return to the divine that has always been ours. And as we stand on the edge of this revelation, we are called to embrace the divine wisdom that was hidden but is now ready to be reclaimed. The black gods are here, waiting to lead us into a new era of spiritual awakening and transformation. Will you answer the call? In the journey to uncover the divine origins of black spirituality, we must turn our gaze towards two sacred lands, Nubia and Ethiopia, that stand as pillars of spiritual strength and power. These ancient civilizations were not mere footnotes in the Bible, but crucial players in shaping the very foundations of faith. Yet their significance has been downplayed, their stories buried beneath centuries of history. distorted by those who sought to control the spiritual narrative. However, the truth is undeniable. Nubia and Ethiopia were not only the spiritual cradles of ancient Africa, but they also held a divine knowledge that was carried across generations, from the banks of the Nile to the heart of the Middle East, influencing the very stories we now hold sacred. Ethiopia, often referred to as the land of the gods, was a powerful kingdom, revered for its wisdom, wealth, and deep spiritual connection to the divine. Even within the pages of the Bible, Ethiopia is recognized as a place of spiritual enlightenment. The Queen of Sheba, a figure whose wisdom and spiritual depth continue to captivate us, journeyed from Ethiopia to meet King Solomon, one of the wisest men to ever walk the earth. Their encounter was more than a diplomatic visit. It was a meeting of divine minds, an exchange of profound knowledge that went beyond gold, spices, and treasures. It was a spiritual union that echoed through the ages, a recognition that the land of Ethiopia had always been a place of divine wisdom and power. Yet how often do we hear of Ethiopia's significance in the context of faith? How many times have we been taught about the spiritual strength of the Queen of Sheba, the Ethiopian prophets, or the sacred lineage that flows through the Ethiopian people? Very rarely. In fact, the biblical references to Ethiopia often serve as a mere backdrop to the stories of the Israelites, rather than acknowledging the kingdom's own spiritual contributions. But this erasure is not just historical oversight. It is a deliberate silencing of the divine origins of black spirituality. Consider the Ethiopian eunuch in the book of Acts, who, after being baptized by the apostle Philip, took the gospel back to Ethiopia, helping to spread Christianity in Africa. The significance of this story is profound. Ethiopia was not just a recipient of external religious teachings. It was a land of divine revelation, a place where the truths of the divine were already known and celebrated. The influence of Ethiopia on the early spread of Christianity is a testament to the spiritual legacy of this ancient kingdom, one that had long understood the power of the divine in the world. Similarly, Nubia, the great kingdom that stretched from what is now Sudan to Egypt, was one of the most powerful and spiritually significant civilizations in the ancient world. The Nubian pharaohs who ruled Egypt during the 25th dynasty were revered not just as kings, but as living gods, divine beings with a deep connection to the spiritual forces that governed the cosmos. Yet, how often do we hear about the greatness of Nubia in the biblical narrative or in mainstream religious teachings? The silence surrounding Nubia's spiritual influence is another example of how the black gods, those who walked the earth in Nubia and Ethiopia, have been systematically erased from the collective memory. But the story of Nubia and Ethiopia is not one of defeat or subjugation. It is a story of spiritual endurance and rebirth. The people of these lands carried within them a deep connection to the divine, a knowledge of the spiritual forces that govern the universe. And despite centuries of colonization and spiritual suppression, this knowledge has never disappeared. It has been passed down, hidden in the rituals, stories, and symbols that still resonate with the African diaspora today. These sacred practices continue to awaken those who seek the truth of their spiritual heritage. The black gods of Nubia and Ethiopia are not just figures of the past. They are alive in the memories and hearts of those who are awakening to their spiritual power. The divine teachings of Osiris, Isis, and Horus continue to guide us today, just as they guided the people of Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia in times long past. But to access this divine wisdom, we must first acknowledge the spiritual connection that links us to these ancient gods. In our modern world, we are often taught to view the divine as something distant, something that exists outside of us. We are told that God is an isolated being far removed from the earth and its people. But the black gods of ancient Africa knew better. They understood that the divine is not something separate from us. It is within us, flowing through every part of our being, every part of the natural world. The gods were not just deities to be worshipped. They were guides, teachers, and protectors, showing humanity how to live in harmony with the earth and with each other. This is the truth that the black gods of Ethiopia and Nubia carried, and it is the truth that we must reclaim if we are to truly reconnect with our spiritual roots. The journey to reclaiming our spiritual inheritance begins with understanding that the divine is not external, it is internal. It is alive within us. The black gods of ancient Africa were the first to teach this, and their wisdom can still guide us today. When we acknowledge the spiritual wisdom of Ethiopia and Nubia, we are not just reconnecting with the past, we are reclaiming the divine power that has always been ours. As we continue to uncover the spiritual truths hidden in the stories of these ancient lands, we must ask ourselves, what happens when we finally embrace the divine wisdom that has always been with us? What will change when we acknowledge the spiritual legacy of the black gods, the gods who were once worshipped in Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia? The truth is that when we reclaim these teachings, when we allow them to awaken within us, we will begin to experience a spiritual transformation. We will reconnect with our ancient power and step into the divine legacy that was given to us long ago. In the end, the story of Nubia and Ethiopia is not just about the past. It is a living story, a story that is still unfolding today. As we honor these ancient lands and the black gods that once walked there, we honor the divine that is within us, that is all around us, and that is waiting to guide us on our spiritual journey. The time has come to reclaim our spiritual birthright, to remember the black gods, and to walk once again in the divine truth that has always been ours. Let us awaken to the power that has always lived within us, and let us reclaim the spiritual wisdom that has been hidden for so long. The gods are calling us back. Are we ready to listen? As we bring this journey to a close, I want you to reflect deeply on the stories we've shared, on the forgotten gods who once ruled the lands of Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia. These divine beings whose wisdom and power shaped entire civilizations have been silenced by time. But their stories are still here, etched in the ancient symbols, hidden in the rituals, and carried in the very soul of those who are connected to the land. The divine truth that was once whispered in the temples of Kemet is still alive within us, waiting to be reclaimed. We've uncovered the spiritual roots of our existence, roots that were nourished in the black soil of Africa, the land where the first gods were born. Their stories, once erased, are now coming back to light. We are being called to remember the divine wisdom that these black gods embodied, to remember that Elohim is not just a singular being, but a divine collective, a community that reflects the interconnectedness of all life. This knowledge is our birthright, a connection to the spiritual heritage that has always been ours. As we awaken to this truth, we must understand that the divine has never been distant. It has always been here, in the very air we breathe, in the ancient lands that gave birth to these gods, in the blood that runs through our veins. The black gods are not gone. They live within us, guiding us towards spiritual awakening. If this journey has opened your eyes, touched your soul, or even sparked a flame of curiosity about the truth of black spirituality, I ask you to take a moment to honor this awakening. Like and subscribe to Continue this journey with me. Together, we can uncover more divine truths, share the wisdom that has been hidden, and bring light to a world that often feels dim. If you feel that this video has brought value to your spirit, that it has helped you find a bit of light in the midst of darkness, I invite you to share your energy with me. Every like, every comment, every moment you spend supporting this channel is deeply appreciated. It's a gift that allows me to continue making these videos, sharing the sacred wisdom that's been passed down through generations. Remember, no contribution is too small. Your support, whether it's a simple click of the like button, a thoughtful comment, or sharing this message with others, is an invaluable part of this journey. You are helping to breathe life into the divine truths we've rediscovered. Your engagement fuels my desire to keep sharing, keep learning, and keep spreading the light of these ancient teachings. And if you've found peace, or strength, or inspiration through this video, I thank you from the depths of my heart. We are awakening together, and the journey is just beginning. As we continue to explore the black gods, their stories, and the truths they've shared with the world, I invite you to walk with me. Let us not forget the divine legacy that is ours, and let us remember that the black gods, the gods of Kemet, Nubia, and Ethiopia, are always with us, guiding us toward the divine awakening we are destined to experience. If you have felt something stir within you, something that says, "This is the truth I've been searching for," don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Let others know that the wisdom of the black gods is real, and that it is time for us to reclaim what has been hidden for so long. Our spiritual inheritance is here, waiting for us to step into our power and awaken to the divine truth we've always known deep inside. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this moment of awakening with me. Let us continue to uncover these divine truths together, and let us walk in the light of the black gods, the ones who shaped this world and who still shape our souls today. Your support makes all of this possible, and for that, I am truly grateful.